You're listening to the Social Selling Simplified podcast. Stick around if you too are obsessed with learning things that actually work and believe that success leaves clues. We're all about identifying results-producing roadmaps and getting super clear on how to scale and grow your online business. From part-timer to president, social selling expert Ashley Shaw will help you connect the dots and take the guesswork out of what works to grow a social selling empire. It's time to hear from social selling legends, listen in on truthful conversations, and learn the best tips and tricks to reduce the marketing overwhelm so you can build the social selling business of your dreams. If you're ready to go all in, no holding back, and build the business you've always wanted, you're in the right place. Here's your host, educator, social selling guru, and fitness industry OG, Ashley Shaw.
Welcome to Social Selling Simplified. I'm your host, Ashley Shaw, and today I'm going solo. And the reason that I've chosen to do this episode came from two main foundational things that happened this week for me. The first was that in my mastermind group that I'm a part of with Rick Mulready and the other accelerator members, as they're called, we were asked about what podcast we would want to be on and how we could add value to that podcast. Now, I knew right away that the podcast that I would definitely want to be on would be Jenna Kutcher, and her podcast is called the Goal Digger Podcast. And the next question that followed that was, what value would you add? And I had to take a minute to really think about my answer to this, because it might be a little bit of what one would call imposter syndrome, where I don't feel like I'm a marketing expert. I more so feel like I like to research things and figure out what works. And I feel like expert it's a heavy word that is tied to a lot of expectations. And I would more so identify as a researcher and a tester. And when this question came about, I had to stop, and I actually had a conversation with my husband about it, because I really wanted to be thoughtful in my response. And one thing that happens when you become a guest on someone else's podcast that you should do, this is like podcasting 101, you go through and you have a look at all their episodes and you figure out what's missing from the conversation. And then you are able to go to that host and say, hey, like, I can see you've done topics in these areas. This is one area I think your audience would really benefit from. So I went through that process, having a look and seeing where could I add value. And there were a few things in there. I thought, okay, I could definitely have an opinion on that and have some conversations about authenticity and what I think is necessary to create a writing process that feels organic and really helps you align your values and put your best self out there. But it felt like it was not exactly what I was really trying to say. And that's when Bill and I got into a discussion about stories and how there are some podcasts you listen to that are great. They dig into some business stuff. They give you some great tips, and you leave that episode feeling like, okay, I've got an action plan. I've got a roadmap of what I need to do. And then there are episodes that you listen to that shift and pivot your life. And they are stories you've heard from someone else that make you rethink your own life. And that felt like it was more important in terms of how I could add value to Jenna Kutcher's audience. That felt like I was actually hitting on something that was important for her listeners to hear. Now, the second thing that I came across this week that has been going on is the George Floyd movement, and really trying to listen and watch and understand how to best support Black Lives Matter and deciding how to speak carefully and thoughtfully about what is going on and how I can contribute. And in speaking to one of my mastermind students, we got into a bit of a discussion around how this has impacted her as a Black woman and how she's always felt that her story and what she experienced in terms of racism growing up, how she never wanted to use that to propel her business forward. But we've come to a time that it's too important not to say anything and not to share those stories. And it got me thinking again about this story that I'm going to share with you guys today and how important it is for us to share our stories because they do connect us. And really, if one person is listening to this episode and it changes their outlook or makes them think about this topic a little bit differently, then that is what it's really about today. So this episode today is all about heartbreak and rainbows. And it's messy, it's raw, and I'm going to try to be super duper real with you guys about this experience because I think anybody that is going through something like this, the can needs to be opened and there needs to be more room to talk about these things. So my story starts off actually with my grandmother. My grandmother grew up, she's 85 years old now, and she has a condition called Wiskott-Eldritch syndrome. And with this condition, when she had her children, she had 6 children. 2 of them were boys that had carried a genetic condition, and that is what Wiskott-Eldritch syndrome is. It's a genetic condition that is passed down, and how it works if you're looking at genetics is when you're a female, there's 4 different scenarios that can happen. You can have a girl that's not a carrier. You can have a girl that is a carrier. You can have a boy that's not a carrier, or you can have a boy that is a carrier. Where this genetic condition becomes very serious and dangerous is when you have a boy that is a carrier. And to not get too scientific here, the way that this condition works is that it's X-linked. So when you're a female, if you're a carrier, you have 2 X's. So one can help the other out. So you can carry it, but health-wise, you're fine in most cases. So in this circumstance where my grandmother had 2 boys, they both had Wiskott-Eldritch syndrome. And so what this meant is that their life expectancy at that point, one lived to be 4 years old and the other lived to be 6 years old. And there are a lot of complications with this genetic condition, 3 of which stand out the most here and are what are most commonly talked about. One is they do not have any ability to clot blood. The other is that they have no immune system, so they can't fight anything off. The third is that they have really bad eczema. So any itching or things like that, their skin can get infected and infections can be caused very easily with that. So you have these 3 things that you're dealing with. And there can be various severities of the genetic condition. It just depends on your family. And there are ways now, like modern day ways to test it. So this is, an experience that my mom has told me about. My mom was the youngest of all of the children and has memories of her brothers, but definitely, has various things that she'll say about growing up with them, that one looked more sick than the other and the other one really looked very healthy. And so she has various things that she's carried on with her and that she's remembered from, growing up with this experience of losing 2 brothers. And so my mom is also a carrier of the Wiskott-Eldritch genetic condition. And when she was pregnant with me, she actually went through some testing, but now I am 35 years old. Back then, when they did the testing, they could only tell if it was a boy or it was a girl, and they couldn't tell you anything beyond that. And so when my mom had me, she opted for the testing, the amniocentesis, and it was so stressful for her that she did not want to go through that again. So she was quite fortunate in the sense that, I was born healthy baby. They did a blood test and I did come back as a carrier of the genetic condition, but I was healthy. So it was no problems. Now with her second pregnancy, she decided that she did not want to go through the stress and she just did not get tested at all. Boy, girl, nothing. She was just going to deal with the circumstances. And she was extremely fortunate. We all are extremely fortunate that my brother was born and he was completely healthy. So he was always sort of the miracle baby because he was a boy and did not have the condition. My mom then went on, she was pregnant a total of 6 times, and she lost a baby at 8 months in her pregnancy, and had a stillbirth, which to this day, I can remember as a child going through her boxes in her room and finding a box of stuff that was all about Nicholas. And in having additional conversations with my dad and with my mom about that time, obviously my mom, really had a challenging time with this, as anyone would, and ended up going and spending some time with, I believe it was a professional in the field that dealt with Wiskott-Eldritch, and I believe she was in California, and my mom went to go spend some time with her as she was trying to pick up the pieces and deal with this loss. And it was a rare condition, this as well, something that they said was completely unrelated. They said that the baby's kidneys did not form properly. And then my mom went on to have 2 additional children. She had a miscarriage in there as well. But I have 2 younger sisters. So my mom did not have it easy on her by any means. She decided to forego any of the testing and just deal with whatever cards she was dealt with. But she definitely had her share of heartbreak and having to really work through some unimaginable things. And all I can think of is just, how resilient these women before me are. So I knew going into getting pregnant that we may have some challenges. And I was naive, I think, to the possibility of what these challenges could be. I was 33, 2 years ago, out in British Columbia. I was working full time as the president of a fitness company. And I remember my mom called me and I was sitting in the underground parking lot of the gym I was at that day in my little red mini convertible. And she said, "You need to get tested." And I said, "Mom, I'm not trying to get pregnant. I'm good. We don't know if we want kids. I'm just good, And I remember being a bit agitated by it, of talking to my husband later and it being like, why is she putting so much pressure on me to get tested? And I decided, you know what, I'll do this for her. I'll just get it done so that, that this is out of the way. And I went to get the requisition, the blood work done. And she had told me, I think you're positive. I remember that from you as a child, that you were positive. And so even though I maybe had heard that before, I really didn't think it was something I needed to be concerned about or that would affect me. I just sort of took it as, yeah, okay, Mom, I'll go and get it done and we'll go from there. And I remember getting that call the day I got my test results and just feeling like so deflated, even though I guess I knew there was a possibility that, her memory had served her correct and that this was something that I potentially had and that I would have to deal with. I think it was that moment of my innocence in a way around that it would be maybe easy for us to conceive a healthy baby. I think it was the loss of that right in that moment. It hit me that this may not be as easy as we think it's going to be. And it wasn't that I had felt like I wanted children at that moment in my life, or that I had, had been visualizing kids and settling down or any of those things. But I think it was the immediate feeling of the rug being pulled underneath me, that all of a sudden this may not be the possibility that I had once imagined it. And so I tried to, rationalize with myself, as we all do, that, the emotions are out of control here. Like, you have nothing to be concerned about. Like, you don't even know if you want kids. So that self pep talk happened, and I went on my business and my daily life, not with it far from my consciousness, but within reach, that this was something that was sitting there one day to possibly be dealt with. And it wasn't until a year and a half later that I moved back to the same province as my husband. We had been living apart. At the time, he was coming out every 4 weeks, and then he would come home for 4 weeks, and then he was coming out. We had decided that this arrangement for us would work while I was working in the fitness industry out on the west coast of Canada. And he had found a job in his field in Ontario where he could stay with his parents. And so it worked really well for us. With that money, we weren't paying for another house here. So he was able to travel all the time back and forth. And so I really got to stretch my legs in the corporate world and do some things that I definitely couldn't have done in Ontario as I had wanted to do. So it was a perfect opportunity for both of us at the time. But the day came where I moved home, and it became more apparent that perhaps this was the time to maybe settle down. The company I was working for had a lawsuit against them, and they decided they weren't going to pursue things anymore. They were in a pretty big legal battle, and they decided to close their doors. So I was all of a sudden home now and living with Bill again. And it was sort of like, okay, this is the new normal after 3 years of, living in different places. Like, now we're back to the new normal. And as I was navigating this situation with the company closing and dealing with those things, I found out that I was pregnant, which was definitely not in our immediate plans. Like, we weren't trying to get pregnant, and it somehow just happened miraculously after 15 years of being together. So it was I guess you could call it like a welcomed surprise. It was like, okay, I'm home. This is obviously what we're meant to be doing, I suppose. And all right, let's do this. And we had bought the house in Bill's parents' backyard. So we knew we were going to be very close to them. We're right by the beach, and it would be a really, great place for us to raise some kids and to explore life with what it now looked like with a different landscape. So I had been working on my online business at that point for about 7 months. But now, again, it was my opportunity to run into it full time and to really start to, I guess, make that decision. Do I need to keep handing out resumes, or can I really put my heart and soul into this and get it to where I want it to go? So those were the two things on my radar at that point, really working on my business head first and in navigating this new pregnancy and trying to understand how this was going to work and what it's about. So at this point, when you're someone like myself that carries a genetic condition, there is a series of testing that we have to go through. And Wiscott is extremely rare. So it makes it even harder because every doctor's appointment, you're going in and you're explaining to the doctor what this is about and what is going on with the situation. So we met with a genetic counselor quite quickly after we found out we were pregnant. And this was our first time navigating these roads of what our pregnancy journey was and what that was going to look like. And quite quickly, they told us that, it was definitely going to be something that we were going to have close contact with the genetic counselor in the hospital throughout. And how the landscape basically looked is after we found out I was pregnant, we had to wait for the blood test, which is usually done at about 9 to 10 weeks to come back with the gender. So once we found out the gender, which happened to be a baby boy, we then had to book in our CVS appointment where they can get a sample and then they send it off to the States. They have to grow the sample to see if the baby has Wiscott. And so obviously the first blow to this, pregnancy is you're made to feel like it's supposed to be this time of extreme happiness and you're just over the moon excited. This was just not our experience. We were, scared. It was almost like not wanting to get too attached. And I remember I just kept praying, like, not my first one. Please don't let it be my first one. And after going through this waiting period of what felt like an eternity, we went and got the CVS done where they go through, in my case, they went through the belly, got the sample, sent it off. And I got that call back after an agonizing 2 weeks in which they let us know that the baby was carrying Wiscott. And at this point, I think it felt like it was one of those moments of, I have no idea how to feel, how to react. I just know that I have to do something. I have to be busy doing something. And they had put us into contact with the doctors at Mount Sinai in Toronto. And it was this very, very awkward process of trying to make a decision without having a lot of information about what this pregnancy looked like and what life would look like and how science and technology had changed, what the average life expectancy could be, all these different factors swirling around in our brains as we're trying to figure out what the heck the next steps are and what you can do when you feel so helpless. And so we talked with our doctor and the genetic counselor, and there's a very delicate balance here, of course, where there are certain people that decide to carry on with pregnancy at this point. And there are also people, I felt like they were more in the medical field, the ones that were very real with us about what could happen, what the life expectancy is, and the quality of life that baby will go through like, as soon as they're born. We were lucky in the sense that we knew what we were getting, the cards we were getting dealt. A lot of people that have Wiscott, they don't have that immediate answer while they're pregnant. Like most find out after, because it is so rare and the baby has lots of complications and bleeding and there's all these things happening, and it's after that they find out. So after meeting with medical professionals, our genetic counselor, it was like we were on this timeline of having to make a decision quite quickly as to whether this was a pregnancy we wanted to carry through or not, and what that would mean. And what makes this so even more screwed up is that you have to decide on at that moment if you're going to terminate the pregnancy, because time is ticking along. You've waited to get all these tests done, and it's not like, with our medical system, it's not like time is really on your side to leisurely make those decisions and to wait on it. Like I felt a lot of pressure from our genetic counselor that I had to make a decision. And she didn't even want me to book a time with the immunologist in Toronto, because I wanted to meet with the immunologist and understand, the one who's treating these babies, what are his views on it? I really want to be educated about everything that could possibly happen. And I want to be educated on what we're getting ourselves into. And from a doctor's perspective that deals with these things all the time, what does it really look like? And my sister happens to be a doctor as well. And she also is a carrier of Wiskott. So that was definitely a voice of reason. I felt like I could talk to her and better understand, with her knowledge and her experience of what these conditions actually meant, what her opinion was. And so painstakingly, I had to tell the genetic counselor what I guess I felt she wanted to hear, like, okay, just book the appointment for us. And I still want to meet with the immunologist. And so it was like, no, that can't happen. You can't have it both ways, is basically how it was explained to us. So we said, fine, like, I'm still going to meet with the immunologist, and I still want to understand what we're going through. And if you can't book our appointment, then you can't book it. I wasn't willing to go into the next stages of this without fully getting all the information. So my husband and I and my mom and my sister drove up to Mount Sinai, and we met with the doctor that deals with all the Wiskott babies. And it was heartbreaking to understand how, this little baby that is so innocent, so small, they have to go through a bone marrow transplant if you can find one. And then it's a treatment that you hope that the procedure works. And there's still risks of cancer, and the life expectancy has increased since my grandmother's time, but the prognosis was not happy, shiny, everything's going to be okay. It's like you're locked down at the hospital. First, like, you have to live by the hospital. There's just no other way with all these complications. They were also able to tell us that I have the most severe case, because there are some conditions where the Wiskott is not as severe, where maybe the bleeding isn't as bad, but this is, the case where a head bump, on the side of a table can cause your baby to bleed out. So it was very shocking, but also I felt very fortunate to be able to get in to see someone and talk them through, and be able to talk to my sister, the one that's the doctor, and just really understand, like, if you were in the same situation, knowing everything that we would have ahead of us, what would you do? And it became very clear that the only way to describe it is my heart was so torn between knowing what I felt like was the right decision for us, and knowing how much it was going to shatter us, and just how much I knew that it would hurt after the fact, but knowing that it was the only choice that we really had. And we made that decision, and it wasn't easy. And I think what made it so hard is not a lot of people talk about it, and talk about having a termination and what that feels like, and trying to explain to people that you made the choice. And when they ask you if you're, what happened, if you're pregnant, all the aftermath that comes with it, there's no way to describe that when you
read the book on loss. And we got through it. We did. We got through it. And I think the moment that it really sunk in for me after trying to pull myself out of it, I was walking each day to just try to get out of my head. And we have a beautiful beach where we live. And so I would go for my walk just knowing that I have to get out of my head. I have to listen to something different. I have to change the state that I'm in. That became something that was so important for me to do on a daily basis. And the more that I started sharing my story with people, the more it felt like that heaviness on my heart was being not lifted, because there's no way to explain that grief just lifts. It doesn't. It sits there. It sits very heavy on your heart. But the more that I was able to listen to podcasts and talk to people actually at Mount Sinai Hospital, the more that I was learning and understanding that the more you tell your story, it takes 50 times for you to tell it, for it to move from trauma and sitting there to moving into a memory. So I heard that and was like, okay, like I can't hold back. I know there was a time that I couldn't talk about it. It was too painful. But when I did start to move it and talk through it, it started to feel a little bit better and just a little bit lighter. And it wasn't like the pain just disappeared, but it definitely started to move. And so this one episode I was listening to of this podcast, I'm walking down the beach and I'm listening to all sorts of things, podcasts on grief and podcasts on how to cope with losing a pregnancy and all these things. And I remember hearing this story that I will never forget of this woman that while in Jamaica vacationing with her family, her husband went out to save their son from a riptide. And she was a strong swimmer. The wife was. The husband wasn't as strong with the currents. And they both ended up going in after him. She saved her son, but she lost her husband. And I heard that story. I remember just losing it on my walk back and just feeling like I know grief cannot be put in any specific order or placement of one is worse than the other. And that's not what this was about. It was about understanding that there was hope, that we could try again. And that, when I heard that woman say, my kids lost their father, there's no one that can ever replace that. I just remember thinking, I'm so grateful and we will get through this. And that was the pivotal moment for me that shifted that grief. Now, I would love to say that our pregnancy journey from there was easy and that things just went smoothly from there on out. And I can't say that they did. After that, we had just a series of what therapists call those really, really, tough events where they rate those on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like the most monumental things in your life that happen and that really shift and change you, losing a spouse, losing a child. We ended up losing our dog of 13 and a half years a couple months after. So getting pregnant the next time, which happened 2 months after that, it felt like, my mom just kept saying to me, like, if you get pregnant again, it'll help that pain go away. And so that's what we did. We got pregnant again, and I'd love to say that things, switched around and it was, easy peasy lemon squeezy, but that was just not the case. We had actually the exact same thing happen, and we lost our second later that year. And while all this was going on, I think the biggest triggers that anyone that's lost a baby would have were seeing other people getting pregnant, seeing other birth announcements, even little things that seemed little, I guess, but it was just a trigger for me, seeing people complain about like, oh, like I can't sleep. I'm so tired. The baby's been up all this time. And I'm just thinking, my gosh, like, there are people that can't have children or that are struggling right now, and you have everything that they're wishing and praying for, right? You know that, right? And that just seemed to be something that I had to snooze all those things on the newsfeed. I had to consciously make decisions to not engage in that because it was way too painful to try to watch and just feel so hopeless. And the only way I can really describe to someone when you feel that you don't have this ability is like something that you feel should be given to you, that you've always had, is all of a sudden taken away, something that your future depends upon. Telling someone that they can't have children, or what's even more hurtful on the other side of that is people saying, oh, just get a dog, or just go adopt, or go do this. And I'm not saying that those aren't great options for people, but it negates the hurt that you're feeling when all that you are trying to do is wrap your head around why you can't have children. And so I would just, if you're someone listening out there that is able to offer any condolences to somebody that is going through that, please don't offer those suggestions. I promise you, it's not that your intentions are not good. It's that the person is grieving a loss. They need to be able to grieve that loss. It's not about just trying to replace it with something else in that immediate moment. So after we had this second loss, we decided we were going to take a break. And we were very fortunate to be able to travel to Asia. We went there for 4 weeks and just got out of it all. We went to Indonesia, we went to Vietnam, we went to Singapore. We met up with some of our really, really great friends that actually were at our wedding 10 years before. And we were able to share some things, just me and my girlfriend, who, they're also were in a position that they were struggling to get pregnant. And so it felt just so liberating to be able to have conversation with somebody about it. And I think that because of our circumstances of making the choice that this was, we had to make that decision. And most cases of loss, people don't have to make that decision, whether that child is one that they want to keep or if it's not. And that's what made this whole experience so much more challenging, is that I didn't feel like I should talk about it because of other people's opinions and judgments. And what I've come to realize now is that when you have not been in someone else's position, you are best to not comment on their situation. Because believe me, along the way, I've had many opinions shared with me, and I have only told a select few very close people in my life about our experience and what's happened. And yet, even the people closest can be, in these cases, sometimes the most hurtful for not respecting that you make the decision you make because that's what's best for you. And that is what you feel is right in your heart at that time. That has felt, I think, the most claustrophobic about this whole situation, is knowing, when can I share this and not be afraid that other people are going to have judgments. And I've gotten to a point that if that is something that bothers you, our relationship is not one built on a foundation of trust. And it's really not my problem. So after getting to that point, being more at peace with our journey and our story, taking the time to pick up the pieces and taking 7 months off from anything to do with trying again or putting ourselves in that sort of situation or possibility of being hurt. I just focused on my business. I focused really hard. I joined a mastermind, and I was very lucky to be able to find a way to grow my business, to do what I love, to put the systems in place that I now had the opportunity to retire my husband and to be able to dedicate our time together to the freedom that we've always dreamed of, to have a wonderful team of people that I work with, and these amazing communities of coaches that I help, that it just goes on my wildest dreams. But I don't think that that space would have been created if we hadn't gone through what we did. It provided us this opportunity to really dig in and focus on where the next direction was, because I needed a goal. I needed something to focus on outside of what was going on in my body. And this it would have been, I guess, December, we found out we were pregnant again. So of course, there were all the emotions of what's this going to be like? What is coming down the pipe for us? We're ready, but this just feels like, I don't know, is the third time enough to turn you off from wanting to keep trying if it doesn't happen for us this time? And I'm so thankful to say that we got the phone call from a genetic counselor, in which at this point I had switched genetic counselors because I just couldn't handle the post-traumatic stress of dealing with the same person in the same circumstances and all those things. And we got our blood test back and found out we were having a baby girl, which meant that my pregnancy could resume as normal, as normal as pregnancy can be. I can't tell you how thankful and grateful it felt in that moment to know that we're going to be parents. And it just it changed my perspective on when I hear people say like, oh, like kids are really hard, say goodbye to your freedom, say goodbye to, going out and drinking on the weekends. Like I am in such a different place in my life where this is what we've been trying for the past 2 years. Like no one can take away that joy of what is to come. No one. No matter how hard you try to tell us that it's going to be challenging, you're not going to sleep much, say goodbye to your freedom. Like it's a really funny thing when something that you want so desperately is something that you cannot have. Anything that happens after that moment, it's a gift. And that is how we have looked at every bit of this pregnancy thus far. Now, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I feel like this episode has been a long time coming. It's been sitting heavy with me because I feel like I've wanted to share, I've wanted to tell this story because I think that there are other women that have similar stories that maybe went through the same things we did, where they were afraid to share and didn't know how to bring it up or breach the subject. But if anything, for those of you that have listened all the way to the end, I really hope that if you are somebody that's going through this, that you just don't give up hope, and you know that at the end of heartbreak, eventually will come your rainbow. And it's so important that you know that at the end of the day, it will all be worth it. Every loss, every heartbreak, it will all be worth it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Social Selling Simplified.
If you're like 99% of coaches out there, you may be struggling with what to post daily and how to stop feeling like a salesy salesperson when you're sending hey girl messages or cold messages to people that you don't know, or maybe you're avoiding it altogether. I totally know how you feel. And when you don't have a posting strategy that's working to warm up your audience, it can really feel frustrating as to knowing how you're ever going to grow a business to the size that you want so that you can decide to quit your job, you can stay home with your kids, and you can build the authentic business of your dreams. And that's why we've created the Done For You monthly marketing funnel. Now, this membership has not been open to the public for 3 months, and the waiting list is just getting started. You're going to see the Done For You monthly marketing funnel open up in July, and you don't want to miss this opportunity to get on the waiting list. Go to ashleyshaw.ca/monthly marketing strategy and make sure to join the waiting list so you're the first to know as soon as the membership opens so that you can make sure you grab a spot. I'll see you on the inside of the next episode.